Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. I'm going to give you a broadcast tonight live on Facebook and also on YouTube. And tonight is the 23rd day of December 2020. And what I entitled my show is simply The Fairy Tales That We Believe. And this is all to do with the United States government and how it was created. And so, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share you some books that I've already read so that maybe you can research this yourself because I think this is critical that we do these things to help others out. So, this is one of the books I read here. This is Hologram of Liberty, the Constitution Shocking Alliance with Big Government. This is done by Kenneth W. Royce. He also went by the name of a pseudonym, Boston Tea Party. He wrote many books back in the 1990s to do with your gun rights. And basically, this book covers what really takes place during the Constitution when they met in Philadelphia. Most are not aware of what is taking place, but I'll share that here in a minute. The next book I'd like to share with you is this particular book. This is called Americans Counter Revolution. I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. American Counter Revolution, the Constitution Revisited. This is by Shelton Richman. He did a book here. Basically, what he's saying simply is what took place during the meeting in Philadelphia, that it was a coup. And I will give support for that evidence there. I just want to share you this as a particular book. These books are what I call, you can get them. You better get them before they're gone, because basically in the near future, they'll be gone. They won't allow you to read these books anymore. The next book I have goes further on to the history during the Civil War. I call it simply the war between the states, because guess what? And you see, the books are already out, gone. They're gone. This book is completely gone now, selling for $217. And I bought this book only 3 years ago. This is Lincoln's Marxists. This is about what takes place when the failure of the revolutions that took place in 1848 in Europe, and how those Marxists came to America. The other book here is simply The Creature from Jekyll Island. This is a book by G. Edward Griffin. Again, this book has gone up. The price is, when I bought it, was probably $19. Now there's $30.75. Again, this talks about what takes place in the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is not anything to do with the federal government, folks. It is a private banking cartel. That's what it is. So I wanted to share that with you. Those are the books I want to share with you. So here I'm going to now go into what I'm going to share with you and what took place. There is a couple other books that I got from, and you can't get them. You have to buy them from a source that I know of. This is a New History of America. And this is done by the Informer. Also, there's information here from James Montgomery, who is also from North Carolina. Both these men were from North Carolina, did tons of research for over 25 years or more. And this is the other book, The Myth and the Reality. Just Who Owns the United States? This is the particular book here, which was written back in 2008. And why did I do this? Well, I think it's critical that you know your history. And my background is in poli-sci, political science, and also in history. And then I also went to seminary and pursued church history, but that's another story. What Kenneth Royce tries to explain to us is that what happened, and we need to understand simply, is that basically this is aristocrats. I have a theory. I believe that many of our so-called leaders, Thomas Jefferson, Adams, I believe they were double citizens. I believe they were citizens not of Britain and also of the United States. Can I prove that? Well, I can come close to it. I believe that these men were either possibly threatened by Britain to do this type of work. I know that simply is that this is something that most people are not aware of. They trust their teachers to teach them their stories, and these are not stories; these are fairy tales. And so, what takes place after the war? We really didn't win the war, folks. If we did win, we, in some ways, if you look at the Jay's Treaty and the Treaty from Paris, also in 1783 and 1787, both these treaties do not give any recognition of the United States being a separate country. That is, we are still a British colony, and we have been that way ever since. Most people are not aware that the Internal Revenue Service, that is your taxes that you pay to the IRS, goes to Britain, and that's the truth. It doesn't go to the United States whatsoever. So Britain has been doing this. They've been using their power for a long time, although in reality they're not actually ruled. They don't rule themselves. The Vatican actually rules them. That is the church, the Roman Church rules them. They have confiscated all the land on the earth, claiming that it is their right, since they claim that they're from the seed of God, which is nothing but ultimately bullshit. But it's all third person. It's all on paper. It doesn't live. It's not reality. See, something's written on paper in third person doesn't mean it's actually true. And so what happened? We're under enormous pressure after the war to pay debts, and those debts were to be paid to France, and it was $18 million. The United States didn't have that kind of money themselves, the country, and so what had to take place was they had to take it from their citizens in one way or the other. And we know that there's red flags here, and there are two major red flags. And I've shared this before with some others. The Shays Rebellion that took place in Massachusetts, and the Whiskey Rebellion that took place in southwestern Pennsylvania. These are critical for you to understand simply is because after the war, it was what I would call, many people were tired of the war. We're talking 6 to 7 years that this war dragged on here in the United States. A lot of people wanted just to go back and let's get this country going and let's move on and try to make money and get our economy set up, and so we can be prosperous in the future. And that didn't take place. That took place later, but not exactly that early. The whole issue with the Whiskey Rebellion was to do with what I would call selling whiskey without taxes. You see what I'm saying? Without taxes, it simply is that the government had to get some way of getting this money to pay off France. And so they taxed liquor, corn mash, what do you want to call it, moonshine, because they needed it in order to pay their debts. And what transpired simply is not only there, Shays Rebellion is the thing that takes place in Massachusetts, that basically the governor comes in and basically says, hey, excuse me, I'm going to raise your taxes here. Now, how do you do that? Well, this is mainly on property tax here. And so he raised taxes on property. And people got angry and got damn mad. In fact, they were actually on their way, and they were going to take all the guns from the militia and use them to overthrow the governor of the state. That didn't take place. Someone got word of it, and they didn't secede. They didn't secede also in southwestern Pennsylvania. They never connect these things to you in history classes. They talk about them briefly, and that's it. Well, you got to follow the logic here and say simply, wait a minute here. Why did this take place? You see, if things were so peachy and so great, then why did these rebellions take place? Okay. And people were, this is, we're talking about 6 or 7 years of war. Certain areas of the country did not have battles in it. And then other areas had plenty of battles that took place. And so people were threatened. Like where I live here in South Carolina, there were many battles that took place here in South Carolina. And there were battles also in North Carolina. There are a few battles that took place in Georgia, but South Carolina was one of the major states that many battles took place with the British here. Also, if we go back to the north, simply most of the battles are taking place in New York, some in New Jersey, some in Pennsylvania, but most of the battles are taking place in the state of New York. And if we go, we also know simply is that the United States was unsuccessful. Most don't know this, that the United States decided to, before this took place, the war, we actually attacked certain areas of Canada. We failed miserably, but we were trying to succeed in that. We failed. Anyway, I don't want to digress in that part. So what happened simply after the war, we're supposedly under the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation is simply a loose league of what I call a confederation between the states. There's very little to do with central power. The government is there, yes, but is not a major player whatsoever. It's basically to deal with what I call dealing with trade with one another. That is the states to be able to trade with one another. That was critical, as anybody would know in this area, is to do what I call the economic situation, simply was to have trade with one another. And this took place. So these group of men decided to meet in Annapolis, Maryland. It didn't go well because not many states showed up sending their leaders. Well, the question you got to ask then is simply who were these leaders? Who chose these people? Well, we know that most of these people were well-to-do. Okay, they were entrepreneurs, that type of thing. But the people have no idea, you see, this is going on. They were chosen, not elected, not chosen by anybody in the state, and they went to Annapolis. It didn't work out because simply there were not enough people there. The major reason why we know some of this is because of Patrick Henry. When he was invited on the next meeting, which was in Philadelphia, he said, "I smell a rat." And he's right. He understood it. He smelled a rat because he knew that basically something's going on here and it's not right. And so what transpired in Philadelphia is that in this particular book, he points this out very critical. We also know that James Madison took notes for this meeting in Philadelphia. And the hologram means simply is hologram is not real. This is a fictitious reality, fictitious way of looking at things. In other words, it's not in solid ground, so to speak. So in other words, simply is a hologram simply is just who knows where it's at, this liberty at, okay? So there were over 50, 60 men who showed up. They met in the summertime. They also met in the hot summer with windows closed. That's right, there are no air conditioners back then, folks. Having an armed guard at the door, so no one was allowed to come in. And the doors were locked and the windows were shut. So this was not to be, no one was supposed to know of this because, see, this is treason, folks. This is all to do with treason. So these things that we've been taught in our lives, simply because of education, which was introduced back in the 1820s, 1830s, to do with basically already trying to teach the populace another story, and those that actually maybe knew some of this stuff are now no longer living or actually elderly people. So what transpires simply is that they meet. And we know that Alexander Hamilton is a key figure in this whole rigmarole. Yes, there's Benjamin Franklin there. There are many other people we look up to, thinking they're great people. Now, let me explain something to you folks, because this shoots the whole thing. This sinks the ship. You see, Lysander Spooner points out simply is that we didn't sign the Constitution, so we're no part of it. And he's right. We never signed it. No one gave approval to it. No one of the people did at all. People say, well, maybe that was to do with the Anti-Federalists and the Federalists. Well, yes, but the key is simply how many people were involved in that. Well, it's only men who actually own property. So we're talking less than 10% of the population, if not less than that, who chose that. So these are mostly what I call aristocrats and entrepreneurs who had land. And the only way you could vote back then was, I don't care if you're white or black, if you didn't own property, you couldn't vote in those things. And each one took place in each state. And so I just want to point out simply is that these things took place later on. And many of the papers, that is the newspapers, were actually, guess what? They were owned by well-to-do people. And so they were unable, the Anti-Federalists were unable many times to get their word out to go against this. And again, very few were involved. So why did this happen? I think the key is a couple things. One is to do with the $18 million debt. Now, since we've got ourselves in this mess, how are we going to get ourselves out of it? And the United States did print money, continental dollars, and it was totally worthless because there's nothing behind it. You see, once it lost faith, people lost faith in it. It had no value. So what takes place is it's a farce. So they've got to have real money. They've got to have what I call, gold and silver. So what takes place is they borrow money. That's right. They borrow money from well-to-do people here in America to pay the debt back. And they force the people who own property to pay property tax. So we know that some major red flags took place also during the battles. That Cornwallis, that was trapped supposedly in Yorktown, we know that simply is that Alexander Hamilton actually had a regiment, and he led a group of Americans on one side, which were most of them are Anti-Federalists at that point, these soldiers. And on the other side of the left flank, it was the French. The key was that the last part of the battle was Alexander Hamilton and his men didn't have any more bullets to shoot. So they charged with a bayonet, which means simply they have very little chance of actually getting to the wall and overthrowing it. And so many of those Anti-Federalists died in that particular battle. Now think about that, because this is critical. That these were leaders from their states that were fighting these battles, and this particular battle at Yorktown. And the French did have ammunition, and they were successful, such and such. But the key is what stands out is that Cornwallis never gave official surrender. He never signed a paper to, we're surrendering, the British are. He had a lieutenant below him to sign that, but not him. Now, I don't know if that has to do with him he didn't want to be the one who was going to take the responsibility for the loss, supposedly. We know something else, that Edward Burt, which most people put him on a pedestal, he spoke during the war, and he said basically this: let's just let the United States win this war, and it will be in our favor because they will think they're the victors. And for the rest of their country's life, we'll be taking taxes from them. That's a nice way to explain what he shared. Most people put him on a pedestal thinking he's a great man. all these men have allegiance to something else, folks, something dark that we know that rules. That is either as part of the um, um, Masons or some other group that's trying to bring down a country or get something to be used. Another critical issue, simply as this war goes, with the war goes on, attrition, people are tired of the war. It's just like the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War here in America, and I lived in the early part because I'm 60 years old. People got tired of the war because we wasn't exactly winning any battles here. Our strategy was very poor. It was basically designed a way of simply to use American men, fighting men, in a lost cause. But Vietnam was not about communism. It was about drugs and having control of it. And the same thing that's happening today, that we've been in Afghanistan for approximately almost 20 years. And they had nothing to do with the 9/11 deal at all. It's all about powerful consortium and people who want to make money, and they use our own troops to do this. All these wars are about that. It's all about it's nothing to do with what I call the wars that's asinine. The wars to give people freedom. Hello. I don't know of any other country that does that. And I know that France helped us out, but France hated the daylights out of Britain. And their strategy eventually was they were hoping that the United States, which we'll talk about at another time, was that with the war between the states, was that they were going to get part of America again. And they were going to get the northern part, the southern part of the United States, and the British were going to get the northern part, meaning that the British already were involved in Canada. So this is what takes place here is critical later on, because see, these people play chess, and we think they're playing checkers, and they're always preparing for the future, always. See, so these particular books here, as I've shared earlier, are critical because they lay out what really is going on here, that we were never free. And he points out simply, even with, you can go to, let me show you a site real quick here. It's anti. Yeah, hold on here. I'm going to pull it over here and show you a share screen here. This is it here. And they point this whole thing out. I think you need to see these things and look at it. It's a website. It's the Anti-Federalists, a group of people in Georgia that actually shared information here about what really takes place. And how many men were involved. The British actually brought in Hessic troops from Germany. They paid them for this war. And what I have here simply is approximately 154,000 men were here from Britain, and there were anti-Federalist forces approximately 95,000. So I go into this thing and look at it. So anyway, I don't want to go, you don't want to get off on this, but I just want to explain. Indivisible is bad. E pluribus unum is fascism, which is, most people don't understand these things. But anyway, I've kind of gotten a little bit digressed here. But anyway, I'm going to go back to here where I'm at. And let's see, stop that. Okay, we're back. So we know that Virginia is a critical state in this vote to take place, and they pretty much they need to have all they got to have all states to approve this. Supposedly 13 colonies we have, and all 13 at that point I think there was 6 or 7 or maybe more, but Virginia is a critical state. And what happens simply is that Patrick Henry is fighting, and actually they meet in a church because the church is actually the largest facility that they actually can have these debates. And eventually Virginia capitulates and gives votes for the Federalist particular perspective. All states actually vote for this except one state that did not. Does anybody know what state that is? Well, maybe not. I don't have any comments here, so I don't know. But anyway, it's Delaware. Delaware never gave approval to the Federalist and Anti-Federalist perspective. In fact, they were, after the war and everything, they were actually threatened. They better change their side, or else there would be military threat to them. So this will give you an idea that simply is not what they tell you in school is not true. It's not true. And I've never seen as much research on this in the last maybe 15 to 20 years, when there are books that are now coming out saying simply is, this was a coup. This is what this was. It was a coup. No one knew this, but it's a coup. And people will say, what the hell are you talking about, Brent? The key is simply is they never claimed to do away with the Articles of Confederation. You see, they forced something out. You see, and came in. I said, never told anybody about what they were doing. And suddenly they come out with this Constitution. We the people. Has nothing to do with us. Never has. It was all about the aristocrats. It was always a way of, quote unquote, guess what? For them to make money. During after the war, these men who sold ammunition and all kinds of things made money doing this. And our government had to pay for it, which not our government paid for it, but the taxpayers had to pay for that also. Not just the $18 million that we owed France, but also the money for the ammunition and whatever else, the guns, whatever, the clothes, whatever. These people made money off of this. That's part of the whole deal, folks. Just like here in the United States now, the whole circumstance is that we have many companies here in America, which is called the defense, the defense industry. Well, guess what? They're out here to make money for the United States to go to war. That's what this is all about. Going to certain countries and bombing everybody and building armaments and building tanks and all this stuff is to make money, and also the profit and take from others. I don't know how. And I had someone that shared something here on Facebook, and I'm just sorry, I've got to share this. Someone was complaining about the situation that the veterans were not being treated right. That is, those that went to the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and wherever else we've been, that they weren't being treated right. Well, look at that tag on your little soldier's shoulder, not shoulder, but around his neck. It's a dog tag, is what it's called. Almost all political leaders look at you as soldiers are nothing but dogs. Mark Passio talks about that. Very clear. They're all dogs to them because you're being used. They don't give a damn about you. It's a decision. I remember sharing with a young man this has been 15, 17, 18 years ago, wanted to go and fight over there Give those people freedom. You're not giving them freedom. You destroyed their whole country, you idiots. What the hell's wrong with you? You shoot innocent people? We did that in Vietnam too. When are you people going to come to your senses? When I was in 16, 17 years old, 16, 17 years old, they wanted you to sign your name such and such. I wish I never did it. But anyway, I didn't know any better. You had to put your name in the hat in case they continue the war. You might be drafted, which I knew I wasn't going to fight and kill anybody in Vietnam because simply they didn't do any harm to me. They never did anything to me. Why am I want to kill somebody in another country? Just because your country tells you they're the enemy? People lie in government almost all the time. That's what I'm saying. It's fairy tales, folks. You believe in this nonsense. And you go on and do it, and then you complain that, quote unquote, they're not taking care of you because they see you as dogs. That's what they see you as. You're used. If I was drafted, I would have been what they call a non-combatant person. So I wouldn't have fought to kill other people. I don't see any Vietnamese came here in my country and attacked it. They never attacked it. And then there's other excuse. Well, they were communists. Really? Well, possibly yes, but that doesn't make you go across the rest of the world to kill people, killed innocent people. Then most of those people want to be left alone. They just like anybody else. They want to be left alone. Most people don't realize simply is in Vietnam simply is the French-Indochina area, which was the French were there before in the 1950s were there. So we came into 1962, I guess, 63. We were already there before then. And so guess what? They just want to be left alone. And what's wrong with that? So we kill people in the name of supposedly saving them from communism. Look around you now, folks. Your own country. It's communitarianism. They've done another Hegelian dialectic to you guys. You don't even see it. It's part capitalism and part communism. Part of it simply is to steal people's property. You won't have any property. It's all going to be basically capitalists that come in and destroy people's property where they live at and take it and say, oh, it's not worth anything. So they don't even pay you for it. They just steal it. That's what's taking place on the West Coast. Seattle, parts of Portland, parts of California. Just come in and say, well, we're going to build some type of railroad system in here and we're going to mass transit such and such. And people think, oh, this is great. Then they steal the property. They steal it. They don't even pay for it. And then they build the people for it. Anyway, I digress. But the whole idea here is to you to understand that you've been fooled and you believe in these fairy tales and you keep believing it. Our country has been used ever since it was developed. It wasn't that long after the United States was brought up and became a country. We were involved in wars. Yes, 1812 war. That was with Britain. And I'll talk about that another time. I've actually got another video shares about that. It deals with the 13th Amendment that most people are not aware of. The missing 13th Amendment. You've been conned all your lives. Don't you want to wake up and see what's really going on? No, most people want to, and you can see what's happening already here in our country is that, oh yeah, they're gonna give me money each month for me not to work. Oh really? Really? You believe that nonsense? I got a bridge out here off the state of South Carolina out in the water to sell you. The government lies to you all the time. The media tells you lies, and you believe them. And then you wonder why the media is always on their side. Oh, they play this right and left thing all the time too. But anyway, back to the whole story here is that The United States has been used. And basically it's been used when the first part of our wars and eventually to destroy what was left of those who knew something was wrong, especially when we talk about the United States was involved in Mexico under President Polk was involved there in the 1830s. And we have also eventually the rift between the North and the South, which I believe that simply the Masons and the Jesuits were all involved to split the country. That was part of a plan. I believe simply is Lincoln, who was a lawyer, who made plenty of money supporting the railroads at his time. So he wasn't some poor person, folks. That's what people don't understand. Another thing is very critical. All presidents of this country repeat presidents, president. Why is the word president used? Why not, chancellor or prime minister? President means to deal with a corporation. You see, the word president has a different interest. If you know, he's the president of the company. He's the president of United States Steel, U.S. Steel, or he's the president of Pennsylvania Railroad. Now, economic interest has nothing to do with a political issue. The president's pulled, and most of them, all of them are royalty. And it's funny simply is when you look at the Constitution at that point, even when you look at their rules such and such, there's no position for a district attorney general. There never was. They created that office. It was never in the Constitution about attorney general. They also claimed you had to be born here and be a citizen. Well, guess what? President Washington wasn't born here. He was a surveyor who came here to steal from the Indians. And guess what? All the other presidents until, I guess, probably Zachary Taylor was the first American, I'm guessing this, but I'm pretty sure this is who it is, was the first American that was born on this soil. So all the presidents before then, they were not obeying the Constitution. You see? And they would say, well, why, how this could happen? Well, this is what, people don't see. And so what transpires simply is we're in a whole mess now in this country because we're economically, we don't have the power that we once had. I'm fast forwarding to the present day now. And our country is so dependent upon foreign countries, so dependent upon getting certain products from foreigners. So we're no longer independent. We are dependent upon other countries. And it's done on purpose now because the United States was used as a military weapon to destroy countries like Libya, trying to destroy Syria, trying to destroy countries like Egypt, which they did. They brought in another government that's far more radical than what was before. All these little countries, we were involved in the quote unquote, the Balkans area where the Eastern European countries were, how we devastated those countries, Serbia, Bosnia, I can't say that name, Bosnia. All these little countries were destroyed somewhat in the United States because they want to put in somebody else, folks. And they put in an excuse. Oh, these are bad people. We gotta come in there and help them. So that's part of the joint agency with the NATO. You see, if you look at the NATO symbol, you'll notice it looks almost like the Nazi deal. And that's also a key because we brought many Nazis in our country after World War II in order to help our rocket program, supposedly. But they brought their ideas also in. That's what most people are not aware of. So I'm going to go back to something else. We're talking about, what's the word I want to call it? What we're getting now. And it's I've got a book here. And let's see if I can pull it up here. Hold on a second here. Hold on. And what it is simply is a, if I can pull this up here, let's see. Hold on. Bear with me. Communitarianism. Can you see that? This is a book written by a lady used to live in Seattle. This is the mixing of the communist viewpoint and the capitalist. You see how this works, folks? And so it's the Hegelian dialectic. And so they create another way of what we call communitarian. And communitarianism is simply this, means it simply is, oh yeah, you have human rights. That's right, you have human rights. But they're not individual rights. Big difference, folks. In other words, communitarianism is based upon what I would call what the community wants, which is democracy. That's totally opposite of what we've been told. We're not a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic. So what's happened now is simply is we're wanting your individual rights no longer count. That's what's going on right now. You don't have any rights. You see, now if your neighbor, let's say your community, say to where I'm at, such and such, say, so we don't want this, and they say in their favor they don't want it, then it won't take place. But if they want it, this communitarian viewpoint, which means simply is you no longer have the right to speak out. You no longer have the right to own your own property. This is totally what they want. So they won't even have to pay you anything for your property. They'll just take it. And you not only now you're already a slave now, but this is simply is you're a slave. You don't even own any property. You don't have any ways of actually creating anything for you to actually to survive on. In other words, you are now totally dependent upon the state, and that's what they want. That's what they want. They want you to be dependent upon the state. So this is a book I've read quite a bit of it, not all of it, and this is what they want. This is communitarianism. This is what they're pushing. Many people have no idea what's going on. This is what's going on in the cities of, like I said, Portland and Seattle. And your rights, she gives an example where she lived at in Seattle. She lived in an apartment complex. And those that going to make something beautiful, so they said, we're going to come in here and build this up. We're going to make this a great community. Where she was in the city of Seattle. And what transpired simply is that the man who owned the building, thinking he's going to get money, he actually is holding out to get money. But what happens is simply they had a trick. And that trick simply is they came in and said, okay, your building, it's got all kinds of rat infestations. You got issues here with something that's, and we're going to condemn it. So he didn't get anything neither. Do you understand? This is how dirty these people are. And the problem is simply is the politicians have gone along with them, and there's no one really knowing what's really going on. So they're thrown out of the house. They're thrown out of their building just because they live there. And then they tear down the building. They don't pay the owner of the building, so he gets nothing for it, even though he's owned it, because it simply is that, oh, well, they're not up to codes. You see, this is how they create all these little laws and come in. I'll point out simply another thing. Here in South Carolina, there's a group that calls the Council of Governments. They're in each county now. And what they are is an NGO. They're non-government. I'm sorry, not an NGO. It's a partnership between private and public, part of it is. But it's a way to get around everything. You know why? Because these people who are well off give tons of money to these people so they can come in and help people out, because people are getting poorer and poorer. People say, oh, this is a great group, such and such. And lo and behold, eventually, you won't have the opportunity to vote anymore whatsoever. These will be what they call NGOs, and they will take the power away from even elected politicians. I'm not for elected politicians either. It's a charade too. But the point simply is there'll be NGOs. So NGOs simply is they will run it. And you won't have any way of actually throwing them out of the office, supposedly. See how they accomplish this? So you need to be aware of what's coming. Our country is being destroyed piece by piece economically. When I was at work, my father owned a business and I was a salesman and also managed the business. And what we did simply was buy certain products that were made here in the United States. We did buy some from Japan at that point. But we saw the destruction of what Bill Clinton and his cronies invented, these quote unquote free trade crap, these free trade agreements that actually benefit only the rich, only the well-to-do. And so they can build a factory across the border of Mexico, border of the United States, and have it come back in the country, and there's no import tax. You see, no import tax whatsoever because they approved the treaty. Also important, treaties, repeat, treaties trump constitutions. They always do. Okay? The treaties that these people signed for and approved this are traitors. That's all they are. So we saw within 1994 when they approved this NAFTA, I argued against it immensely. Knew what it was all about. It was going to destroy jobs. So guess what? Some of these plants build a new plant across the border, Mexico, so then they can bring that in. So now you don't have a separation of states or countries anymore, a border here in America. Yeah, you want to come in our country and take whatever you want, you can come in our country. You don't even have to be, a citizen, such and such. This is how to destroy a country. It's not from an outside enemy. It's not from military type of reason. It's an internal destruction within. And it's a Trojan horse. That's how this works. It's how they've always used this to bring down great countries. That's why most countries don't survive to approximately a little over 200 years. Because guess what? People get spoiled and they want everything from the government. They want everything to be solved by the government. When the reality simply is they can solve it themselves, but they don't want to, you see, because they've been entrenched with ideas simply is that they need the government. They need the government. We need the government, see. So what's happening now simply is we can't build anything anymore. I mean, think about the foreign manufacturers of cars here. Okay. Let's see, we have a Toyota plant. Probably have two of them in the United States, if not more. Oh yeah, we have a Nissan plant here in the United States. That's right. We have Mercedes-Benz in Alabama. We have the Nissan plant in Tennessee. We have a Volvo plant here in South Carolina. We also have a BMW plant in South Carolina. And there are others. They're foreign to come here. Why? Because they don't have to pay import tax. It's more financially advantageous for them to build it here, pay people, $15 to $20 an hour, and then what I would call destroy the country from within. And it's been happening. And think about this. As wages gone up, I remember when I had a secretary in the 90s. I wanted a good secretary to work for me. So I hired her and paid her $8 an hour. Now, that was in 1994, 95, 93. Now think about that. That's not bad pay at that point as beginning. And I eventually increased her pay to $10 an hour. Because I wanted a good secretary. I wanted someone who I could trust, who would pick up the phone and wouldn't play games and be very professional. Now, what are they offering people now at work to start out? $735, $750, whatever it is. And yet inflation is going on. How in the world are people going to survive? There's no way they could survive. Many now working 2, 3 jobs. They're working 3 jobs. Because, the government had to help industry out because they didn't want to pay, guess what? They didn't want to pay insurance for people. Walmart's a big deal with that. Walmart doesn't pay their their employees any type of insurance whatsoever. And yet they can pay these people $8 or $10 an hour. And these people are still trying to survive. What the hell is wrong with people? You know? So even now you see it simply as in those years that we're talking, now we're fast forward to 2020. So this has been 25 years ago. What I paid someone. I would have to pay someone, a secretary now, if I ran the business, I would have to pay her close to $18 to $20 an hour or more, because the money is not worth anything. I know there's something else I can share with you. I know that I dealt with some services that is from Europe. That is back about 2 or 3 months ago. The dollar is no longer what it was even 4 months ago. It's already lost value over 10%. So that means that I had to pay more in exchange for a euro type of thing. So what's happening is our country is going through an inflationary period, and it's moving it's been rapid here. This year it's been super rapid. And guess what else? This phony virus has destroyed many jobs. It's making people dependent upon government. And that's not what you want to be. You don't want to be in that boat, you see? And yet that's the road we're going down. If you got property, I'm kind of digressing, but if you got property, you need to be growing things on it. You need to have a garden. You need to have some fruit trees. You need to be growing things so you'll be self-sufficient. You also can help your neighbors out at that point. That's to your advantage. If you help other people out, they were protected, you see, because it'll be a source of food. Now, if someone, becomes a problem, this could be a different story. But I've kind of gone a lot longer than I thought. This is over 50 minutes. But I just want you to understand that I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just pointing out reality and what I see. And I worked for my father for over 20 years. And I learned a lot from my father. I learned a lot about business, such and such, and running a small business. There aren't hardly any small businesses left, folks. There aren't. You think about the restaurant business, a lot of those businesses were small businesses, family restaurants here and where I live at. They're gone. And the mayor says, oh, we got to clamp down here, such and such. Someone needs to, deal with people like this, do this kind of crap. One person makes this decision, although I'm sorry, it's not one. It's a city council also. But, all cities, I want to point out, all cities are corporations. Are you aware of that? They are corporations. They're incorporated. Go to other areas in the county where I live at, and there's no mask requirements at all. Why? Because it's not corporate, you see? This is where people miss. They can't add 2 + 2 = 4. They can't figure it out. They don't want to think about it. That's why they're glued to the television. They want daddy government, mommy government to take care of them. This is how you go back into slavery. It's the same old thing. There's a British writer, a historian who proved this. He talked about how countries, start out and eventually become free, and then And the next thing you know, within 200 years, a little longer, back into slavery. Yeah, I think this simply is that their leaders fool people. So, but I've digressed quite a bit here. The point simply is, when we talk about with what took place, no one. I mean, it takes some guts for this gentleman here to write about this, because basically he's talking about a coup. You know what a coup is? It's a poli-sci major. Simply is this is how to do a coup, and I can tell you simply is what took place. Some of the things that took place in Russia when the country it used to be the Soviet Union. They had the media there and broadcasting about it. Really? Well, a coup doesn't work that way, folks. One of the first things they do is they cut communications off with the rest of the world. They cut it. I mean, they cut the wire. Nothing, no one knows what's going on outside the country, and no one knows what's going on inside the country. That's the way a coup works. Well, at this time period, such and such, back when they took over this country, that is, the leaders decided they were going to write another constitution, such and such, and get rid of the Articles of Confederation, which would have basically said this: it would be decentralized, that it would be less government centralization. Centralization is always value because that's where the power is. See, most people are not aware that simply is Andrew Hamilton wanted in his talks, wanted a monarchy here in America. He wanted the monarchy to just like the British had. That was what he wanted. And you'll need to read about who he is. He's not what you call a very honest and straightforward guy. Suppose, so most people don't know. They just think simply these guys are great people. When in reality, these guys are crooks. That's why they're politicians. They're looking out for themselves. The other thing you have to ask the question simply is that where was Thomas Jefferson here when this all was going on? Oh yeah, that's right. He was out. He was in Europe. What was he doing there? You see, and you got to ask questions, folks. You just got to. That's one, Thomas Jefferson. You see. Anyway, I need to shut up. Talk about what I'm sharing tonight, but the point simply is that it's key that people be aware. We're closing in the end of the 2020 here, and the dollar is going to continue to devaluate. The most important thing you can do simply is to have a place to stay. You paid for it. You don't owe any money on that. You need to grow your own food, have food. Food's going to be more important than money, folks, in the future. Okay, as this country begins to fall apart, going to third world status, it will be food is far more important and being able to take care of yourself. It won't be the money, such and such. And if you do have any money, you want it in gold and silver. You don't want it in paper. You see, eventually the paper won't be worth anything. Argentina went through this. Zimbabwe went through this. Germany went through this. All these countries have gone through this. Most people not aware that simply is in Germany after World War I and how the brutalness of the Allies did what to the Germans. Their money became so worthless that what happened was they would get paid for half the day and get on their lunch break and take their money and go buy bread with it. Can come back to work, earn another 4 hours, and take that money and get what they need again, bread or whatever, because they couldn't wait another day. Because guess what? It was the money was inflated, so it's becoming worth less and less. And you know who's involved with this? It has very little to do with what I call people. Where's the inflation come from? It comes from the Federal Reserve. They create money out of nothing. That's what they do. They're no longer tied to what they call Middle Eastern oil, the OPEC countries, because that's not working out anymore. You see, so we're on the way down, but it's not just us that are going down. Europeans are going to go down too. So is Japan. Japan is working on what they call a negative interest on saving money. See, that's a red flag. And Trump's talked about that also in his administration, wanting to do the same thing. Well, where are people? What does that mean? What that means simply is that the money is not worth storing, not worth saving. You see, because it's being inflated, it's becoming worth less and less. I mean, look around you. What you go to either fast food places or wherever you go to get food, whatever. There's nothing. The food is costing more all the time. You see, so that should be a red flag for people simply out there to simply look. Hey, I need to get either storable food or I need to get some kind of food, such and such. I need to grow. I need to be working my garden. I need to get a tiller. I need to whatever it is to be able to be self-sufficient and not be in debt, not to be in debt to anybody. You see, and I take care of my health. You see. Take care of myself. Well, I don't need to doctor such and such. I'll take care of my health. I take I try to eat the right foods, but I also simply have herbs such and such. You see, not being dependent upon others. That is because that means simply is you're dependent. You want to be as independent as possible in what's coming. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know, I don't know if there's going to be any war or whatever. I know this simply is that basically people need to be aware of what's going on. I've tried to warn people many times what's happening, and I have the background for it. I've been in business. I've studied international affairs. I study history. What the hell you think I'm here for? You see, it's not to get people in fear. It's to warn people of what's coming. Critical time junction in our country. It's also important simply is to help others too. I'm not saying simply, help others. It doesn't hurt neither that way. Also help people who are less fortunate. And always, when you help people that way, guess what? You benefit from that. You actually, when you give, you receive at that same junction. It gives you a good feeling about who you are as a person, a great part of who you are. Because we need to help others and love others, because that's actually the demonstration of who we are. Anyway, I said it's going to shut off about here 10 or 20 minutes ago, and it's already an hour. So I'll let you be. Appreciate you being here. And I'll be posting this also on YouTube and Facebook. Should be live, but I'll also post it. Thank you. You have a good evening.